the years of Mike Tomlin not having a losing season are going to come to a close this year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I can't find it more difficult to see a team that is seen as a fringe playoff team and say, you know what, I can buy into them like I do with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they are going to be atrocious on the offensive side of the football, and that is a team that fired offensive coordinator Matt Canada last year. You couldn't have been worse in the play calling. You couldn't have a 6-year-old with a box of crayons could have had more creativity and inventiveness than Matt Canada did last year calling the plays for the Steelers. And who do they bring in? Arthur Smith, who I feel like has kind of been buried in the weeds, like he's kind of flown under the radar after last year. You know, we watched him not give the ball to Bijan Robinson, not give the ball to Kyle Pitts, not give the ball to Drake London in the goal line or in the red zone, and then tell us all why he's smarter than all of us. So that's the guy calling the plays this year for an offensive line that now most likely just lost its starting center, Nate Herbig, to a torn rotator cuff, a running back room with Najee Harris, who, yes, had a nice finish, nice second half of the season last year, kind of found his legs after it looked like, he was moving in molasses for the first 8 weeks of the season. Now Jaylen Warren's got a hamstring injury. Status for week 1, TBD. Maybe it seems a little better than it did over the weekend when it looks like he was going to miss multiple weeks. Now it doesn't seem like that bad of a hamstring injury. Producer Alex Fasano letting us know that according to Jerry Dulac, typical hamstring injury. Couple weeks recovery, could be ready for the season opener. Either way, we know it's the same old story for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's the same old story. The defense is great. The defense is championship caliber. With Patrick Queen joining the crew now and TJ Watt coming off his injury last year, they are going to be fantastic. They added a little bit to the secondary, getting Cameron Sutton. Who knows whether or not, how long he's going to be available in the NFL this year after the offseason trouble he got in off the field. He's suspended 8 games, so who knows if he's going to be able to make an impact when he steps on the field. But for all intents and purposes, the defense will keep them in games that the offense tries to lose. And I said it a couple of weeks ago, and I've kind of maintained that. I thought they maybe had a shot to get into the playoffs if they went with Justin Fields. But Mike Tomlin, who is one of the best coaches of all time, Rob Brown, preparing week in and week out, motivating his team, finding a way to drag a stalwart offense, which in the years past, they have drafted Kenny Pickett, have employed Mitch Trubisky, have employed some of the biggest collection of stiffs we've seen throw a football in the last half a decade. It feels like they're going to screw this up and they're going to let Russell Wilson lead this team. It seemed like a foregone conclusion a couple of weeks ago. Now it feels like it's an actual true 50-50 quarterback competition, which is one of the most exciting things to look at here over the next week. But Russell Wilson looks as uninspiring as he did for most of last year in Denver. Justin Fields botches 2 snaps in his first game. Looks pretty good, injected a little bit of life into the Steelers offense over the weekend against Buffalo, which, by the way, I mean, how many points were scored in that game? 12 freaking points. So Pittsburgh scores at a big whopping field goal. And I'm supposed to think that this team, with this offense, who lost Deontay Johnson, is going to make the playoffs this year in an AFC North that, includes the Baltimore Ravens, includes the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow coming back from injury. And not that I'm high on the Cleveland Browns either. They're going to be the worst team in this division. And no matter how good this defense is going to be this year, with Alex Highsmith strip-sacking quarterbacks and TJ Watt game-wrecking every single drive, this offense is going to stink. The offensive coordinator is uninventive. He is uninspiring. And they continue to prove that, sure, they can torture their fans for 16, 17 weeks of the season, maybe sneak into a playoff spot, but they are never going to be considered true championship contenders as long as Omar Khan is making the decisions in terms of who's playing quarterback here, or who's drafting the offensive line, or who's assembling the wide receiver room outside of George Pickens. So I see a win total for the Steelers this year at 8.5, and it is juiced to the over. And Rob Brown, I appreciate you letting me go on that diatribe there and getting some feelings and venting out about the Pittsburgh Steelers. But give me one reason that I shouldn't be taking the under 8.5 on BetMGM at plus 116 when the offense is as bad or will be worse than it was last year, which is hard to say.
So I will give you this. There's a difference between I'm going to give you the reason and I believe the reason. First off, I felt that coming from Pat Boyle's chest, all that. I felt that coming from the heart, all right? So I'm going to play devil's advocate here And this is not necessarily that I believe it is true, but that I could see it being true. And we talked about it a little earlier in the show when we were talking about Bo Nix and Denver and the issues out there. I genuinely believe when Sean Payton got to Denver, Sean Payton needed a way to flex a little bit. Sean Payton needed a way to put on display that he was the HC and there would be no further questions. And I think that came at the expense of Russell Wilson. Now, I will bookend that, Pat Boyle, by saying I think Russell Wilson's fake. I think he's plastic. I think his entire image is manufactured, okay? I think he's a guy that understands the concept of building a brand. There's a group of celebrities like this. Taylor Swift is one of them. As much as I have loved Tay-Tay throughout her career, Russell Wilson is the football version of an individual who is more concerned about having the brand be valid than being their true, authentic selves, right? And I put Russell Wilson in there. That being said, I also think the Denver Broncos are a toxic organization right now. I think the Denver Broncos got a lot going on wrong behind the scenes that I don't think Sean Payton is the guy to fix. And I think that to some degree, Russell Wilson was turned into a bit of a sacrificial lamb for that team last year. Do we expect a guy playing with backups in his first action, his first football game in a year and how long? I'm not sure, since the last time, because Russell got benched towards the back half of last season, to come out and look like an absolute stud muffin in game number one. I don't. All right. You all day long, you can simulate full speed defense at practice, but until you're on a field wearing the unis and there's refs and fans, you can't simulate what it is going up against a real life full speed NFL defense. So I think perhaps the expectations may have been set a little high on Russell Wilson in preseason game number one. And I think if you set the bar with, I expect Russell Wilson to look like a franchise savior in the very first preseason game when he hasn't played in 8, 9, 10 months, whatever it's been, I think maybe you gotta have a little grace period there. So the only thing that would scare me off, and I'm likely willing to follow you down the path on the under there, but the one thing that gives me pause here is what if Russell Wilson is him? What if he does, God, I hate the expression, cook? What if he does find his rhythm and his routine and he very clearly outpaces Justin Fields to be QB1 all season long? All they've got to do is stumble and be the same team that they were last year. Have they gotten worse? I mean, some people are going to argue, yes, I'm not. I think they're the same team, but this team hit the over last year. So I'm not one of these guys that goes, oh, I'll bet on Mike Tomlin until he doesn't do it, because he's going to not do it, and I want to be ahead of that curve. The thing that gives me that gives me pause here, what gives me pause here is, what if Russell Wilson really wasn't the problem in Denver? What if Denver was? And what if he just needed some time to shake the cobwebs and get going again? And if the answer is that is what's happening and that is the truth, then I'm afraid you're going to find yourself in a little deeper than you wanted to be with that prediction. That's my thought.